It's 10 a.m. and I'd like to call the meeting of the Board of Directors Friday, August 23rd, 2024 order. Please note this meeting is being recorded. Thanks to everyone joining us today in person and through our audio option. Madam Secretary, would you please take the roll?
Good morning. Director Conroy. Absent. Dorsey.
Present.
Angardio. Absent. Garbarino. Here. Giudice.
Here.
Roswell.
Here.
Hernandez. Absent. Maston.
Here.
Moulton Peters.
Here.
Carr.
Present.
Rodoni.
Present.
Safai. Absent. Snyder. Absent. Stephanie.
Present.
Tirio.
Here.
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 Rabbit.
Here.
First Vice President Hill.
Present.
President Cochran.
There.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. As a reminder, with our new PA system, please be sure to turn on your mic when we open up for director's discussion. So everyone can hear. Please raise your hand and I or the secretary will call on you accordingly. If we miss you, your raised hand, please speak up. Following any discussion, we'll take the appropriate vote. Please follow along referring to the page number located at the bottom right-hand corner of your meeting packet. Director Maston, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Follow after me. Allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Maston. Secretary, would you please continue with the next item on the agenda?
We will now move on to agenda item number 4, which is public comment for any and all items on today's agenda. If you wish to speak on an item on our agenda, please speak to it now. We will start with those attending our meeting today in person, and I'd like to invite Dave Rohde up to the front.
Morning. My name is Dave Rohde. I'm the San Francisco Policy Co-Chair for Al Gore's Climate Reality Project. So where were we? Oh yeah, last month I gave a bit of a fiery speech. My dear departed mother would have said I read you the Riot Act. I feel that I should explain why I was so riled up. In passing a climate emergency resolution 5 years ago, I thought you were on a path to a zero emissions transit system. I'm not here to apologize for confronting you about your limited results, but I do see your point of view. 5 months after you passed the resolution, the COVID pandemic brought everything to a standstill. Transit revenues were a bust and bridge tolls went into free fall. As Mr. Mulligan declared last month, you're now heading toward a fiscal cliff. But during the past couple of years, you've taken the opportunity to reevaluate the district's goals and values, and you prioritize them in your strategic plan. I was gratified to see that the inclusion of climate-related issues. Though I'm not sure how much you prioritize them, you have not abandoned the spirit of your climate emergency. And here's where my frustration comes from. I spend 30 hours a week working on climate issues. I work with 5 different climate groups. I work on local and state climate legislation, and I manage a climate action space online. I'm not an expert on climate or clean energy, but I read constantly books, articles, websites, and I consult with climate scientists and clean energy engineers. 2 things emerge from my climate work: fear and hope. All of the evidence is clear. If we don't move as fast as possible to net zero emissions, if we don't dramatically diminish greenhouse gas emissions, if we allow global warming to increase by 2 degrees centigrade, the next generation will face climate catastrophe. That's the fear. I suffer from climate anxiety. I know some of you have heard from your children and grandchildren about that same anxiety. Climate anxiety is now a leading cause of depression and stress among young people. For them, climate change isn't politics. It's about a livable future. But here's where the hope comes in. We have all the solutions we need to mitigate climate change. We have the clean energy and clean transportation solutions that we need right now to cut greenhouse gas emissions in half. And you have a role to play in this. I don't pretend to understand the management's unwillingness to commit to all electric ferries, but I think both your transportation and your finance auditing committees should be questioning that decision, if only because the hybrid diesel ferries you're talking about will cost at least 30% more to operate and maintain than electric ferries. And I applaud the fact that you are committed to buying nothing but electric buses in the future. And I hear that you're planning to add climate information to your website. I'm loath to close, as Abraham Lincoln once said, we are not enemies, but friends. We find unity, he said, when we are touched by the better angels of our nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodey.
Justine, is there anyone on the line wishing to speak?
Good morning. We have no speakers this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Justine. Thanks for the public comment. We're going on to move on to item number 5 to approve the consent agenda. Before we take our vote, are there any questions from board members on the consent agenda? Not, I would like a motion to approve. So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Let the record show there is no opposition and the motion passes. Move on to item number 6A, which is a report from the general manager. Dennis, please proceed.
President Cochran, members of the board, members of the public, my written report is before you, and I will highlight a couple items. Just to touch base on traffic, overall travel is still well below pre-pandemic levels, but recreational and other travel has returned. Where we really see a continued void is in our commute traffic. Last month in July, commute traffic across the bridge, that is weekday mornings, 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. southbound, was 28% below June of 2019. So the commute has not returned. So midday, there's lots of traffic, but we are not seeing commuters going into San Francisco. That trend is reflected in our bus and ferry service. The good news, though, is that we are seeing slow, steady growth in bus and ferry ridership. So the future looks bright. We just wish it was coming a little quicker. But having no greatly reduced commute does affect our finances. 28% fewer cars crossing the bridge during the morning commute equates to less money in our coffers. And prior to the pandemic and today, tolls are our largest source of revenue. They pay for the maintenance and operation of the bridge. Tolls provide capital funds to match the grants that we receive from the state and federal government. And then tolls are how we fund primarily our bus and ferry system. So it's important to acknowledge that we have fiscal challenges because we have less traffic on the bridge. And while we hope all those cars are green, we also want them all to be paying tolls. And so I just wanted to highlight that 28% less commute traffic in July is significant. And so staff continues to be aggressive in how we manage expenses and how we seek new revenue sources. Earlier this month, on August 11th, we made service changes in our bus schedules. We did that to improve the efficiency of our system, to operate it at the lowest possible cost, while also increasing bus frequency along the 101 corridor and improving connections with partner agencies. Marin Transit and SMART requested some changes, and we were able to accommodate all of their changes. So starting 11th and 12th of August, bus customers will benefit from increased service frequency, as well as the connections at certain key locations in the North Bay. A couple other items I want to highlight. One is that the Federal Transit Administration funds our capital projects on our bus and ferry systems. So when we buy new buses, when we are currently repaving the employee parking lot of San Rafael bus facility to put in solar panels on top, those projects are primarily funded with outside grants from the Federal Transit Administration. In 2012, the California legislature passed a law that then Governor Jerry Brown signed called PEPRA, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act of 2013. It took effect on January 1, 2013. There's been a long sordid history of labor organizations in the transit industry challenging transit grants from the Federal Transit Administration. There's a provision in federal regulation called 13C, and it's worker protection for transit workers. So whenever the FTA receives a grant application from a transit agency, they send it over to the U.S. Department of Labor, and unions representing transit employees have the opportunity to object to the grant, saying it violates labor protections under 13C. When PEPR passed, transit unions in California did object to grants. The ATU objected to some of our grants. All that went through many iterations in court, and it was been held in abeyance now for several years. And so we've had the opportunity to submit our grants and not worry about whether or not we're going to get our money. There's been a recent change, though, that's important to note. On July 29th, a federal appellate court issued a ruling on an appeal that basically said the issue was not ripe, and it sent it back to the courts. So as soon as middle of next month, there may be opportunities for unions to object to transit grants in California. So there's more to follow on that. There's a lot of uncertainty. There'll be more court actions coming up. But as soon as September 19th, FTA grants for transit agencies in California may be subject to challenge. And if that happens, we'll be sure and let you know. I do want to say kudos to our grant staff, Jacob in particular, because we submitted a whole bunch of grants recently to get all the paperwork in so that we'll go through our 15-day USDOL Department of Labor review before that September 19th date. So I just want to put that out there. It's something to be aware of. That risk applies to the Federal Transit Administration funded grants. It does not apply to Federal Highway Administration grants, which we use for the bridge. And I highlight that because you may recall a little over 2 years ago, we received a $400 million discretionary grant from the federal government, and we've been working to finalize the funding plan for the seismic retrofit of the Golden Gate Bridge. It's not in my written report, but I'm pleased to announce that next month we'll be bringing to you a funding agreement. We've been working very closely with the governor's staff, and we finalized things last Friday with them. So next month we'll bring a funding plan to you that will include $149 million of new money from the state of California. In light of the difficult challenges the budget has, kudos to the state for digging deep and being creative in that. So you should never be disappointed when you receive $149 million of new money. We were seeking more. So just to be clear, when we come to you next month for a funding package for the seismic retrofit, it will ask you to approve $275 million from district reserves for that project, which is 31% of the project cost. So it'll be 69% other people's money, 31% our money. 31% as a percentage doesn't sound like much, but $275 million is a lot of money when you look at your grants in the budget book that is in front of you. But it's great news, and so I look forward to having an item that comes to you next month on that. Then finally, I'll introduce our Employee of the Month. This is the most exciting time for our meetings. And the Employee of the Month is nominated by their coworkers, not by management. And Mr. Hung Lam is our Employee of the Month. If you could come up. He's a mechanic, works in our bus division. His efforts are considered extraordinary by his colleagues. His willingness to train others in things like the hydraulic lines is greatly, greatly appreciated. He's originally from Vietnam. He's a graduate of Abraham Lincoln High School in San Francisco out in the Sunset District. He lives with his wife and his 14-year-old son. So when he's not at work, he spends times outside. And we just want to congratulate him on behalf of the district for his tireless efforts. So we can pull
I make it short. Thank you. I'm honored to be here, a member of the Golden Gate District.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's been with us for 23 years and we hope for 23 more, but he tells me probably more like 7.
Hey, thank you,
That
Deb.
concludes my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions related to the general manager's report? Michael?
No, a compliment on, and a thank you for including now a slot for updates on the strategic plan, including our climate change work in the report. Even though it's a vacant slot right now. One thing that would be interesting to see, I know we discussed with regard to the strategic plan, the possibility of taking on at some point staff with a specific focus on that plan, both climate change and the savings of climate change mitigation and the savings possible from climate change mitigation. It would be very interesting at some point to see a draft job description for that position or those positions and some estimate of the cost. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say thank you and to our general manager and compliment Dana Feller, his marketing and communications director, for the work she did to prepare a fact sheet for people in my district who were facing service cuts. And she was able to explain the new trips that exist in the area and frankly, the expanded possibilities, not the diminished possibilities for some of the areas that were facing service changes. So thank you for that. It was well done. I've received a lot of positive feedback from the constituents for that.
Good, thank you, Director. Are there any other questions? If not, Dennis, thank you for your report. We're going to move on to item 6B with our attorney's report. Kim,
Please. Thanks, President Cochran. My written report's before you. I'm happy to take any questions. We will have a closed session today at the end of the meeting, which should be very entertaining.
thank you. Kim, we'll move on to item number 6C, which is a report of the district engineer. As a reminder, the engineer's report can be found in the Building and Operating Committee's meeting packet as agenda item number 6, and John Everly is here to present this report. John, please proceed.
Morning, President Cochran, members of the board. I'd just like to highlight a few of the projects that are going on right now. First, the suicide deterrent project. We're almost complete with the vertical barrier, which is at the North Anchorage House at the far north end of the bridge. We're actually doing final painting right now. So we're pleased that they're almost complete with that. They're also continuing with final sewing at various locations along the bridge. The San Rafael bus employee parking lot. I'm happy that we started the foundation work for the solar panel system. So foundation work is always unknown and it's been progressing very well so far. We hope it continues through the remainder of that work. And then at the seismic project itself, the contractor is continuing doing their quantity takeoff calculations. We're reconciling it with the designer of record and also our third-party independent cost estimator. Once the quantities are reconciled, that'll allow us to all price it based on the same apples to apples quantities. So we're progressing with that work too. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on any other of the items in my report.
Are there any questions of our district engineer? If not, John, thank you very much for your report. And we'll continue on with item 8A on the agenda, which is a report from today's Building and Operating Committee meeting. Chair Garbarino, would you please give your report?
Thank you, President Cochran. The Building and Operating Committee is recommending approval of board agenda item number 8A1, which is to authorize award of zero emission bus on-call consulting services relative to contracts number 2023 BT 06001 to 2023 BT 06003 to Hatch of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Jacobs of San Francisco, and Stantec of San Francisco for a 3-year base term with up to 2 additional 1-year option terms for a total aggregate not to exceed amount of $2 million for the 5-year term. and authorize the general manager or designee to issue individual task orders to the three firms up to the total aggregate approved amount if the task orders are not within or are within this contract scope, within the approved contract amount, and if funding is available within the budget, the district's annual budget as detailed in the staff report, and I so move.
Chair,
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Are there
actually,
any
Chair.
questions related to this item? Yes.
Yes, excuse me. I have a potential conflict of interest, so I will be leaving the room for the vote on this item.
Okay, thank you. I still need a second. Yeah,
Second.
Second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? There's none. Let the record show that there's no opposition and the motion passes. Chair Garbarino, would you please continue with your report?
Yes, thank you, President Cochran. The last item for recommendation is item number 882, to authorize execution of the second amendment to contract number 2020D006B, on-call video production services with Firestarter Studios in the amount of $5,500 for completion of the suicide deterrent documentary as detailed in the staff report, and I so move.
Thank you. Do I have I've got the motion and then a second. I do have a second. Are any questions related to this item? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposition? Let the record show that there is no opposition and the motion passes. Chair Garbarino, do you have anything further to report?
Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Moving on to nothing under item 9 and 10. Item 11 is unfinished business, which I will turn over to Kim for a closed session report. Kim, please take us into closed session.
Thanks, President Cochran. At this time, the board will go into closed session for a conference with legal counsel regarding litigation under Government Code Section 54956.9D2. And we have one potential case. So the board met in closed session as noted on the agenda and gave appropriate guidance to its counsel.
Thank you. Moving on, item 13 is communication. If you'd like a copy of the communication listed, please contact the district secretary's office and take us to the end of the agenda. There are no further items to be presented to the board. I have a motion to adjourn this meeting. So moved.
Second.
I assume there's a second. And I'd like to adjourn the meeting in silence for Shirley. Oh. Well, let's take a minute, please. Right. Thank you. This concludes the meeting of the Board of Directors. 11:46.